I don't know that I've ever had anything just happen for me out of nowhere. I feel like I've set my life up so that when the opportunity comes, I can take it.
In 1996, a college student at Wesleyan University had an idea. Angela Yee had been drawn to music and media, and when she landed an internship at MTV, she was able to merge her two passions. She would go on to assist Wu-Tang Clan's Divine and try her hand in the major label system, before finally she got an opportunity to work in radio, on air at SiriusXM's Shade 45. Eventually, she would elevate to terrestrial radio as the keystone of Power 105's #1 morning show, The Breakfast Club, and become one of the most recognizable voices on the dial. And today, she's prepping to launch her own syndicated show on iHeart, as well as continuing her path as an accomplished entrepreneur with investments in retail, tech, and real estate. And it all started with one idea. A question that I ask everybody at the outset of every episode is how their parents' professional life informed their ambitions.
My mom has had the same job since I was like 8 years old. She works for New York City Transit Authority. My dad, not so much. He worked for AT&T, he worked for Lucent Technology. He was working at like random places. Now he manages my uncle's dentist office. My mom is like the type of person who is not gonna take off from work for no reason. She'll get up super early, get on the train, go to work, be the first person there. She's a really hard worker. I think when it comes to that, sorry Dad, but I'm probably more like my mom. She works all the time.
Where did your interest in media come from?
I always wanted to be a writer from when I was younger. I did a lot of creative writing, and then I got interested in journalism. And when I first started doing things in the music business, I used to write bios for people. I did a Machine Gun Kelly story for YRB. I did a cover story for Vibe for MMG. I think writing is one of the most important abilities you can have no matter what you want to do in life.
You grew up in Brooklyn and went to Poly and then to Wesleyan. Those are two very elite institutions. What do you feel like was the most important thing that you gained from those experiences?
You know, in public school, it might be like 30 kids in your class, but being at Poly, I had classes that were only 12 kids. And so I feel like that student to teacher relationship is really important, having that one-on-one attention. And then Wesleyan, the thing about Wesleyan that I liked that made me really want to go there was no core curriculum. And so I was taking Shakespeare and screenwriting and playwriting and music of the Caribbean and all these courses that I wanted to take instead of having to take classes that were mandatory. And so I feel like I was able to really hone in on my creative skills. I took photography, I was developing my own pictures. That was really fun. It made you feel more like an adult.
When did your attention start moving towards the entertainment industry?
We had an opportunity to get internships with people who were alumni from Wesleyan. And so I remember looking at these internships and not really knowing what I wanted to do. I did an internship at MTV, and that was through my best friend Santi Gold. She was really good friends with Fred Jordan, and he was a music manager at MTV. And she was like, Fred wants you to intern for him. And so I went and interned for Fred. And that was really eye-opening for me. People loved him because he was the person that presented the videos every week that they might add to MTV. So everybody wanted to be cool with him in the music business, because if you wanted to get your music video on MTV, you knew you had to go through Fred. We went to Daddy's house one time to see the Biggie Hypnotized video for the first time. And I remember Diddy had like champagne, and he brought me with him, you know, to things like that. And I also randomly knew a lot of people growing up. Like I went to high school with Lauryn Hill, and when I went to school in Jersey for those 2 years, we were in all the same classes. You know, Santi Gold, we went to college together. So I was kind of around it a lot. And I think those internships is what led me naturally to being in the music business. I ended up getting an internship for Wu-Tang.
Tell me, what is the setup of the Wu-Tang office in 1997 like?
The office was great. I mean, it was a lot of family members that worked there. So it did feel really familiar and like a family affair. I was assistant to the CEO and I handled payroll, anything that Divine needed. I was the person that was like the conduit. So I always let him know what was going on in the office, but then also maybe the president of Epic needed to talk to him, or maybe Steve Rifkin at Loud Records needed to set up a meeting or had some questions. Maybe they were trying to clear some samples and then I had to make sure that I was like in the middle of all of those. It was basically any and everything. Divine was not in the office a lot because he was always moving around. The guys were on tour, but it was like their headquarters. So a lot of times they would come up there, they would smoke. I remember we were on the 12th floor and you would walk in and you could smell the weed in the lobby. And so it was so bad. One day I put signs all up over the office, like no smoking during office hours. And I remember Raekwon came in and was like, who wrote this? And he like ripped all the signs down. A lot of times I was the first one in the office and sometimes I would be there till like 9 o'clock at night. And so it was definitely a lot of work, but it was fun work. I enjoyed it. You know, the guys are like family to me and they were really great. And to the Wu-Tang, that changed my life, the 36 Chambers album. For those were the days when you would go out and buy an album the day that it came out. And I also remember the first time I heard Method Man and I heard Protect Your Neck on the radio, and we had to record it like on a cassette tape because you never knew when you would hear it again. And so that was definitely a life-changing album, and to actually go on and work for them after that, that meant a lot.
Did you have a sense at that point where you wanted to take your career?
I had no idea what I was doing. And at the same time, while I was there, I was writing bios for other people too. And so I was getting like my little side hustle money doing that.
This was the $500 for like the one-pager joints, yeah.
Yeah, you had to do like a little interview. I remember I did Buckshots when he was BDI Thug. I did his bio. You know, it was fun. Like I actually enjoyed doing that.
So what was your next step after Wu-Tang?
So after I left Wu-Tang, I actually left and had a brief fling of a job. I worked at Virgin Records for Chiba Sounds.
Okay.
So it was a little label that D'Angelo was signed to. It was like a horrific experience. They were booking Electric Lady Studios for him to work and he was just not showing up. They had all this equipment, all these musicians. They were just paying all this money and they didn't really have a good communication with D'Angelo. You know, when you're at work and there's nothing going on and time is just dragging, it's like click, click. Every day was like that.
And then from there you pivoted into marketing?
So after that, I left and I went to a marketing company called Avenue B Marketing. And so I would be the person that would write up a proposal to try to get a marketing client and come up with ideas. I just remember though, at the time, my boss kept telling me, I'll have more money for you. And I would see like what the checks were coming in and I'm like, why is this not translating? You know, because I was the person that had to do everything. So we had gotten to a point where I told them, I said, look, if you're not gonna pay me more money, then I need to have some freedom to do other things. And that's actually what led to me becoming more of a consultant than working in-house anywhere. I started working with Nile Rodgers.
Doing marketing stuff? Or?
Yes, so he had Something Else Distribution. At the marketing company, my boss got upset that I was doing other things after he agreed to allowing me to do it. And so I remember one day I came in and he yelled at me. I took my laptop, packed it up and left. And then I just never came back.
Did you have like any sort of trepidation or like anxiety about that after you stepped out of the door?
No, I just did it. It's probably the one thing that you could do to me that would make me be like, I'm never coming back here. And so when that happened, the first thing I did was call Nile and be like, hey, I'm available, but I just want to consult. And so he gave me an office space in their office and I only had to come in once a week, but I had the office to use whenever I needed to. And so that was my first client. And then a couple of clients that they had at the marketing company called me after I quit and became my clients instead. And so I actually ended up making way more money when I left and started working on my own. At that time, I also was managing GZA.
How did the relationship with GZA happen? I mean, obviously you met him during the time you worked there, but how did it elevate to management? What
happened with GZA was he had somebody that was supposed to go on the road with him. He was going on tour to Europe, and at the last minute, he couldn't make it. Something like he couldn't get his passport, and so it was an emergency situation, and he asked me, look, you think you can do this? And that's really how it happened. And at the end of the tour, everything with the money was right down to the penny. And so after that, he was like, no, we're definitely working together.
During this time, what is sort of the feeling that is like animating all of this? Like what is the part that is like, I feel satisfied and excited every day when I get up?
I just was doing things. I wasn't thinking too hard about it. I wasn't even thinking about the future. I didn't have any investments. I didn't have any type of retirement plan. I wasn't thinking about any of those things. I was just happy. I was happy to be traveling. I was happy to have money. I was happy to have a lot of freedom to be able to do what I wanted to do. If I wanted to sleep until noon, I could sleep until noon and then get up and do what I had to do. And even just the things I was doing, it was fun.
Now, with a few years under her belt, operating as a music industry Swiss Army knife, Yee would focus her pursuits and hone in on her career path. Thanks to an unexpected audition at Shade 45, courtesy of Eminem manager Paul Rosenberg, she was able to secure a coveted position on the station's morning show, finding not only her voice, but her audience. How do you then end up meeting Paul Rosenberg and sort of starting the next phase of your career?
Oh my gosh. So I met Paul Rosenberg because when I was in college, I dated this guy. His brother was like down with Eminem. His brother was a rapper. And so I had went to Lyricist Lounge and seen Eminem perform and battle. And I was like, he's amazing. And so we were doing this Park Hill Day. It was an event that Wu-Tang did in Staten Island, like a give back to the community.
This is the picture of him in the yellow shirt with the Wu-Tang logo on it?
Okay, so I booked him to do Park Hill Day.
That's crazy.
And it was like a big deal for him. I remember Divine being like, yo, that kid is really dope. I was like, y'all should sign him, because at that time, Eminem wasn't signed. And I know Mathematics always says that Eminem gave him his demo, but I don't think he even listened to it. And so then my friend Tracy, she went to go work for Shady, so it just strengthened my relationship with Paul because now my friend is working there. That's really how Paul and I established a relationship.
They end up asking you to help out on some marketing for the Shady Limited clothing line?
Yeah, so I was with Jizza at the Chappelle Show premiere, the first ever episode, and Jizza's on that first episode. He was the musical guest. If you see the episode, I'm like sitting next to Dave, like while Jiz is performing. And Paul was sitting either right in front of me or right behind me at the premiere. And so he goes, oh, Angela, by the way, we're starting a clothing line. And so I would love for you to come and work with us. He was like, call me tomorrow. And I was like, okay. And then I called him the next day and that was it. My biggest early supporter, I would have to say, is Paul Rosenberg and Tracy over at Shady. I remember even working in marketing and working for different clothing lines and, Paul making sure that Eminem would wear things. I remember he wore this brand that I was working with on the cover of a magazine. It was the biggest deal. Anytime I make a call to Tracy or to Paul, I know that they'll be like, okay, what you need me to do?
You start working for them, doing some freelance marketing. How does that turn into an opportunity to be the voice of Shade 45?
So I started working there as a freelancer, and then the company that distributed Shady Limited, they actually asked me to come work full-time in-house. So I called Paul and I was like, look, they want this. He was like, if that's what you want to do, that's cool for us too. And so I ended up working there, and then I got laid off. They call it laid off. So I took a little bit of time. And then one day I called Paul and I said, Paul, I see this opening for marketing. I was looking at Yahoo Hot Jobs. He ended up telling me, if you we're looking for a co-host on the morning show with Cypher Sounds, would you be interested in auditioning? He said, I can't guarantee you the job. That's not all up to me if Sirius decides to hire you, but I can get you in to audition. And I was like, sure, why not? And that's how it happened.
When in your career did you realize the power of networking, and how did you think about, investing in that?
I realized the power of networking from even doing internships. When I graduated from college and everybody was trying to hire me, I was like, part of it is how I presented myself. Also the fact that I was always there. Like anything that people needed me to do, it wasn't a hesitation. I did it with a good spirit, a smile on my face. You never know who else is watching you from another department too. You might be working in a department that you hate and you want to be over here doing something else. Or you might be at a job you hate and someone from there goes and works somewhere else and then they recommend you for a position. But I realized that super early on.
You get invited in for an audition, but you've never done anything sort of front of camera before that. Was there any sort of process to get ready for that?
It was so disorganized. First of all, the show started at 8, so they told me to get there at 7. I got there at 7, no one was there. No one showed up until like 8. So we get in, And they like give me some papers and they're like, here, do the news. I didn't even know how to do that. And so I was just really nervous. And then they were making fun of me because I was nervous. And then people calling live, they were like, this girl sucks. Who is she? Get her out of here. And I remember people saying like, how did she get that job? People were really upset. And I didn't have the job. I really was just auditioning. And I remember people being like, who did she sleep with to get that? It was really bad for me. They would give me a CD of the show every day. And so I would take it home and listen to it every day and listen to myself and say, okay, this is what you need to improve on. And during that time, like I didn't go out or didn't do anything because I was so focused on trying to just do this job and get better at it. I did get better. And I remember the same person that called in the first day and said that I sucked, he called in and was like, actually, I kind of like you now. I know I called and said that you sucked before, and I remember feeling like, wow, okay, so, it's probably gonna happen. We did this interview with Jay-Z when he became president of Def Jam. Mm-hmm. And that interview, I walked out and they were like, that's it, you're hired. I remember thinking that it was a tremendous opportunity because I had never done radio. It wasn't even anything that I had thought about doing. I understood that this is something that they'll be taking a chance with me too.
What do you think were like the things that you grew the most at during that period?
I think the news, just because before that, I really didn't pay attention to the news like that. And so it forced me to have to do that.
So you were curating and editing and deciding what was going to be there and then writing your own scripts and all that kind of stuff?
Right, absolutely. And then coming up with segments.
Okay.
That's when I started the Don't Quit Your Day Job. That was a really popular segment for unsigned artists to be able to get their music heard. Then I started this segment, it was called Slut It Out back then. That turned into Lip Service.
That might not have flown in 2022, but...
But the point of it was to show that women have sex and talk about it and let people eavesdrop on the conversations that we have. Women are having sex, but we didn't really have a space to discuss those things. And for the guys, we had a lot of guy listeners on Shade 45. It was a hip hop station. And so it was really educational for them to hear what women think and what we talk about. It was so popular, that's how I ended up getting Lip Service. They actually told me they wanted me to take that and turn it into a real show. And then that turned into me wanting to have women who were like the video vixens, that you get to see them, but you don't get to hear them. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted them to show their personalities. And so, back then we had Amber Rose on. And when she started dating Kanye, all these different networks and different magazines were hitting me up like, hey, do you mind if we use this, video?
Oh, so you had her when she was just in Hype Williams?
She was what she said, the bald girl in the videos.
Yes.
That's how she said people knew her. And so she was on, and that was the only time people had heard her speak.
Did you have a sense at that point of sort of the scope of your career ambitions?
I then knew that radio was what I wanted to do and that type of media. I enjoyed it. Back then, the visuals weren't so important. I remember early on, doing my own videos and then sending it to World Star Hip Hop, to Q so he could put it on World Star. And sometimes they would just pick it up on their own, but I would send it to them because that's how people really knew about the show. And then Sirius got mad and they put this whole mandate out that you were not allowed to videotape any content because they felt like I was giving away free content. And I always looked at it like, this is gonna make people want to sign up. If we put out these little videos of different things, it's not like the whole show. It might make people feel like I wanna get serious. I wanna hear everything that's going on.
So you're co-hosting the show with Cypher, but at a certain point he leaves and goes to Hot. What position does that put you in?
I had the opportunity to go with Cypher, but it felt like having your own show with your name on it was more powerful. I opted to stay and start my own morning show. And it was the best decision that I could have made because it really helped me learn how to produce a show. I really worked hard on it and it ended up being really popular at that time.
To that point, I think, obviously as a consumer, all that we see is kind of the hosts show up, they do great interviews, and they guide us through, a few hours. What are the responsibilities and what's all the prep work that goes into running your own show and where you have to drive the whole thing?
Coming up with the stories that you want to talk about, making sure that it's researched so that you know what you're talking about. Even when you book a guest, making sure that you research that guest so you ask important questions and you know what's going on in their life at that time. Staying after the show so that you can meet with your whole entire crew so you guys can discuss what's happening tomorrow, what else is happening this week, what could we have done better, and just making sure that you guys are always in communication. And also coming up with ideas because you never want the show to get stale where you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. People do think it's an easy job, but they should feel like that. People should feel like...
That's the illusion, right?
Yeah. People should feel like, oh, anyone can do this. And I think you're really great at your job if people feel like anyone can do it, because it shouldn't sound difficult. That means you're so prepared that you're just flowing.
While you're on Shade 45, you also sort of take a step back into the management role and start managing Jay Electronica. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience?
Oh my gosh, Jay Electronica is forever like me and him. That is my guy. And so I first met Jay Electronica at a photo shoot. So it was for this brand called Greedy Genius.
Okay, I remember them.
Yeah, so my boy Joseph I and Mikhail, they were doing a photo shoot for this brand. And so they asked me to come in and shoot for it. And Jay Electronica was the photographer.
Are you serious?
Yes, him and his guy Ringo. So they were the photographers. And that was my first time meeting him. I didn't even know he did music. This is when he was living in Brooklyn with Erica, Badu. And so when I was leaving, they were like, oh, can you drop us off in Brooklyn? I was like, no problem. Ringo would always like send me Jay's music, like, oh, Jay does music. We would love to get him on Don't Quit Your Day Job. And so I was like, yeah, please let me know when you guys are ready. I would love to have him on or whatever. And so then I remember seeing him on the cover of a magazine. Him and Erica were on the cover of a magazine. I was like, oh my God, that's, Jay Electronica. At one point he had moved and then he was moving back to Brooklyn, and that's when he contacted me and he was like, I need to find a place. I'm moving back to Brooklyn, but I want to put together a management team and I want you on the team. And I was like, look, I don't know if I'm gonna do management anymore, but I'll help out. But I definitely was the person that was like going on the road. I'm the one that was like, it's Julie Greenwald's birthday, come to this party, Jay-Z is here. And you should meet him, I think he'll love your music. And he came to the party and met Jay-Z, and that's how he ended up.
Really?
Yeah, and he sent Jay-Z a song that he did, and the next day Jay-Z sent it back with his verse on it, like the very next day. It's time to pivot when you have tried every which way to make something work and it's just not happening. I've tried this, I've tried that, I've tried this, it's not happening for me. I'm not happy, the things that my expectations aren't being met. And so now I have to say, okay, either I have to stop doing what I'm doing, or I have to sit down and figure out a different way to do it. Or maybe the goal that I had is not realistic and I have to say, okay, let's just change direction.
You're working at Shade 45, you're running your own show for several successful years. You end up getting the opportunity to take your talents to South Beach, AKA to iHeart. How does that opportunity come to you, and how did you think about making that decision?
I worked there for 6 years before I left. And towards the end, I was having some issues with not feeling like appreciated. I think at that time, and I said this to them, we have an exit interview when you leave. So in my exit interview, I told them, I was like, I think that Sirius does not support hip hop and R&B the way that they should. I already knew I wanted to leave. I just didn't know what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go. But I did have people that were trying to get me. They tried to hire me in Philly to do the morning show, and then Atlanta also. They wanted me to come to Atlanta to work. And I'm appreciative for that, because to me, it made me feel more confident that, okay, people are outside of here are appreciating what it is that I do, because these were people who didn't even know me. I was leaving the meeting from talking to the program director from Philly, and I was walking to my car, and that's when New York called me. And that's when Clear Channel, Power 105, they called me and they were like, hey, we really wanted to talk to you about coming to work here. And prior to that, I was supposed to work part-time at Power 105. I was supposed to do fill-ins and weekends, and Sirius said no. And I remember just being devastated, but also feeling really upset about the fact that there were so many DJs and personalities there that worked at other stations. I was like, so you guys are telling me no, but everybody else can do it? It just didn't feel fair to me. And I told him, I was like, look, Sirius won't let me, and I can't give up my full-time job for a fill-in gig, but if something else comes up, I'm ready to leave, so let me know. If you know that something's just not working for you, you have to put those feelers out there. You have to let people know. As soon as you start feeling that itch, then you have to really start being like, okay, what's next?
With the recognition that it was time for new challenges, Angela jumped to New York's Power 105, where she landed a role as a co-host of the station's new morning show, The Breakfast Club. In no time, she, Charlamagne tha God, and DJ Envy would achieve the top spot locally. But more importantly, via the internet, their show would break cultural moment after cultural moment globally.
Harvey Graham in the wheelchair. Drake!
Yes!
With the radio in a chokehold, Yee began aggressively growing her portfolio, investing in real estate, tech, and opening a variety of brick and mortar stores.
We ended up having a meeting at this Indian restaurant that I love, Tamarind. So we went there, and that's when they told us it was a morning show, me, Envy, and Charlamagne.
And did you have a sense of who Envy and Charlamagne were when they proposed them?
Yeah, I knew both of them already. So Envy and I both worked at Sirius. So I knew him from working at Sirius. And then Charlamagne, he had actually co-hosted with me on Sirius a couple of times after I got my own show. So
how did you have to sort of change your strategy to, I guess, your on-air personality and fitting into now being part of a trio as opposed to driving?
It wasn't hard for me at first because, you know, I had came from being under Cypher Sounds too, where he was the main host of the show and I was really the support of it. And so, like I said, I think when I was younger, I was always a team player. And so I always know that if, you know, the team wins, we all win. That's how I looked at it.
When did you have a sense that it was really starting to gel and starting to work?
It's hard to find that rhythm at first, especially when you all haven't been working together. We always could see the potential, but it had to improve and get better. And it took a little bit for it to catch on. One of the biggest things we had early on was that Ray J moment.
I got a 20,000 square foot crib. I got an indoor pool, an outdoor pool. I got an indoor basketball court and an outdoor basketball court.
Something like that, like, can change the whole trajectory of people being like, wait, what was this on? Like, I gotta make sure I listen to this. I also knew that I really wanted a video person. It was so important to have those visuals. And so that was another thing that I knew that we had to do. And then we ended up getting the syndicated weekend show. And that really helped us too, to not just be in New York, but to be in all of these different cities. And then that weekend show is what got people accustomed to us to be able to get syndicated during the week also.
And in terms of decisions for the brand of the Breakfast Club?
That's a collaborative effort, not just with us, but also with, you know, Thea Mitchum. She kind of runs the show for us behind the scenes. And then we have a consultant, Dennis, and Dennis will come in and go over what people think about the show, how they view us. And then we kind of analyze that and then figure out like what's working, what's not working, what can be better. Is this how you want to be perceived? How can you express yourself more? What are we lacking? It's always, I think, research that goes into figuring out how do we need to develop the show.
When my name come up, respect it.
Let's go.
Stop playing with my name. I'll drill y'all. Stop playing with my name. I ain't gonna say it no more.
Obviously, you guys made a lot of headlines for confrontational and sometimes salacious moments. Was there ever anything that you felt like crossed the line?
Yeah, definitely. There's things that didn't sit right with me. And I'm sure any one of them will tell you that because we're all three different individuals. And I think my line might not be as far as, you know, Charlamagne's line is. People sometimes affiliate all of us. If one person says something, it's all of us because we're a collective on a show. And people don't always look at you as an individual.
Once you get established and you feel like it's working, is that when you start thinking about diversifying your revenue streams and like building out other businesses?
I started thinking about that when I started making money because I never really had money before. And so I remember getting the job at Power 105 first, almost doubling my salary.
From Sirius to,
yeah.
Wow.
Every check went to me paying off credit card bills. And then I stayed in my apartment at first. I had an apartment. It was like a duplex in Brooklyn and I had a roommate and I was only paying $1,000 a month. And I was like, I'm not gonna move right now, even though I could. I would rather just start stacking my money because I knew I wanted to buy a house. And then I started looking at houses, not knowing what I could afford. I had never done this before. And so I saw a property online that I liked. And so I just reached out blindly and she was like, come on in. And then she got me pre-approved. And I was like, oh damn, I got pre-approved for this. And so it kind of changed what I thought I could afford. And then I remember talking to an inspector. He was like, this is not a bad house, but get a brownstone. It'll hold its value way more. It was just advice. Like I listen to people who are experts when I don't know what I'm doing.
So once you get that property clicking and you start seeing passive income, where do your sort of ambitions start to move from there?
So then I started investing in property in Detroit.
Why Detroit, of all places?
Well, Detroit is affordable. Google has a headquarters there. You know, StockX is based out of Detroit. Even seeing Dan Gilbert, all the stuff that he's doing in the city, seeing the Pistons move back, it lets you know that this is a city that is, you know, on the rise, but also wanting to be part of something that it's getting gentrified, but you want to see like Black people investing too, and people who actually care about residents, you know, who live there. And so that was important to me also, just because Detroit is such a Black city, and I love that, and I love the history of Motown and the Motor City and all of that.
What is step one to start acquiring property there?
Well, I wouldn't buy something if I didn't know people there. So I do know a lot of people there, talking to people, but also then seeing if you could back it up with research online, so you can kind of see how things trend. But sometimes that's not so accurate, and that's why you really have to go there. I would never buy something if I didn't go and see it.
From there, how did you get into opening the juice bar and then the coffee shop?
That was just because for myself, like I had started juicing because I was just feeling like I wasn't healthy. When we started the Breakfast Club, waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning every single day, and then not wanting to eat breakfast, I was just kind of running on empty, and it didn't feel good and healthy to me. And so I saw Styles P had his Juices for Life. So I went to the one in Yonkers, I checked it out. My boy Killer Touch was like, yo, Styles P has a video, you should just run up on him and tell him that you want to do a juice bar, because he knew I wanted to do it. So I went to Styles' juice bar, he gave me his blessing to find a location.
I mean, did you have to do a total crash course in managing a juice bar?
Yeah, I'm still like, you know, crash coursing in that, because things have changed a lot. You have to have great management more than anything. You know, there were periods of time when we didn't have great managers, or we didn't even have a manager at all. I know that I can't be there all the time. And you don't want to have to be. Like, to be a great business owner, you don't want to have to be there micromanaging everything. You want to make sure you have things in place, people and systems in place that will make that easier for you, so that you can go on and start the next business.
What was the original auspice of going into coffee of all things?
I did a lot of research on coffee because I didn't realize that coffee has a lot of health benefits. It helps prevent Parkinson's, it helps prevent type 2 diabetes, it helps prevent Alzheimer's, and all of those things, plus it gives you energy. And also the fact that it comes from Black and brown people. And so our coffee, we have Mexican, we have Peruvian, Ethiopian, and so I think it's important for us to just understand that coffee is our thing. My biggest advantage as a creative and entrepreneur is that I do have multiple streams of income. The investments that I've done that are outside of this space of me being on the radio, of me having my own podcast, allows me to be comfortable enough to know that if things don't work out here, financially, I'll always be okay. Even if I wanted to retire, I'll be able to do that.
At what point did it become clear to you that your time at the Breakfast Club was coming to an end?
I would say like the past 4 or 5 years. I had been talking about it, and I had been saying, look, I want to have my own show. Earlier this year, my boss came to me and wanted to have a sit-down conversation. I had no idea what it was about. And that's when she told me, look, we want to give you your own show. We think that you deserve it. She was like, no, you don't have to stay on the Breakfast Club. We want to develop this around you and have it be a nationally syndicated show that will come on after the Breakfast Club. And so it felt like a dream when I was walking out of there.
How did you deliver the news to the guys?
You know, my boss actually told them I was out of town. She told them first. And I think that's probably the best way to do it, so they could ask whatever questions that they had and not feel weird with me being there.
Okay, yeah.
You know, and then the next day I came in and we had another meeting with all of us after everybody knew about it, where we discussed it, and then we also discussed what we would do on the air. And then after that is when we made the announcement on the air.
Congratulations. I am extremely happy for Angela Yee. Dropping the cruise bomb for Angela Yee.
So tell me, what can fans expect from the Angela Yee show?
So it's called Way Up with Angela Yee. I always think about, like, on the way up, how are you treating people? Are you treating people well? I've always been really good to people, no matter what position they're in. People will tell me, like, Angela, you do too much for people, like, you're too nice. And I'm glad that I'm that way. That's kind of like me being on the way up. And I still feel like there's a long way for me to go and things that I want to accomplish. You know, that's what we're all trying to do, is be way up financially and in our careers and in our lives. Even though I'm not all the way there, I'm way up.
What are the last things on the bucket list?
I definitely want to start a fund to help other businesses, small Black-owned businesses. That's important to me. I love like my coffee shop, you know, and trying to expand that. So being in stores, opening more shops, making it a franchise, that's going to be the next thing that I tackle.
Has there ever been a point in your career where you felt like this could all go away?
I don't think I ever felt like this could all go away, and part of that is because I've always felt like if this doesn't work, something else will. I know there's so many different people that I've worked with that have seen my work ethic and see what I've been able to do that will help me just because of what I've planted already.